What's up, Taiwan? I'm Sally Jensen with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Beijing is scolding Manila after Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. congratulated Taiwan's president-elect Lai Ching-te on his election victory.
我们建议马克思总统多读读书，正确了解台湾问题的来龙去脉，从而得出正确的结论。
Beijing summoned the Philippine ambassador in China and warned the country not to, quote, play with fire on the Taiwan issue. China says Marcos's message violates the One China principle and Manila's political commitment to Beijing. China claims Taiwan as its own despite never having controlled it. The Philippines Foreign Ministry says the message recognized the mutual interests of the Philippines and Taiwan and reaffirmed Manila's One China policy. Beijing's latest rebuke of Manila comes as relations continue to sour over the South China Sea. For more, reporter Rick Glauert spoke to Aaron Matthew Lariosa, an independent security analyst based in Washington, D.C.
There's been quite a strong reaction from China, quite a rebuke of Marcos. How's that gone down in the Philippines and amongst the population there?
It is quite interesting to see China bring up this stuff. They clearly seem to not like any type of correlation between the Taiwan and the Philippines, as we've seen back in spring of last year, actually, when the 4 new EDCA sites opened up across the Philippines, or were announced across the Philippines with the United States. The sites close to Taiwan did kind of alarm Beijing, and Beijing sent a strongly worded statement via their ambassador to Manila to not stoke anything related to Taiwan. I think it's still a bit too early to tell, but generally speaking, anything related with China, this isn't Manila's or the Filipino people's first rodeo with aggressive Chinese statements. They see this all the time in the South China Sea.
And how is the Philippines and China relationship changing? How does the situation in the South China Sea, for example, and the ongoing hostilities there affect this relationship?
Because of Beijing's actions in the South China Sea, as we've seen over the past year or two, it's really hard to continue a good faith relationship when China keeps harassing Philippine fishing vessels within their EEZ, when they keep building up islands, and when they just, it's a lot of not a lot of goodwill to be had. So the relationship, Manila is desperately trying to hold on, desperately trying to do a balancing act, but as the security aspect continues to take over, we keep seeing Manila go to international partners for increased defense and security cooperation. As we've seen this year, a lot of international developments, specifically military related, with the United States, Japan, Australia, and other partners. So as that relationship continues to deteriorate, at least on the security side, Manila's looking for new partners.
How might Taiwan and the Philippines align or cooperate when it comes to confronting Chinese military aggression in the region?
Both countries deal with a lot of illegal fishing within their waters. As we know, the Taiwanese Coast Guard catches a lot of these trawlers and brings them in. And as we know, in the South China Sea, a lot of illegal activities within that region. So a lot of the ways the Philippine Coast Guard has been interacting internationally is increased Coast Guard cooperation. That technically is not military cooperation. It is maritime security cooperation, which both countries overlap. Again, it's really hard just because, again, Manila has to balance between all of the powers in the region and, of course, the United States. So they are pretty risk adverse when it comes to cooperation.
That was security analyst Aaron Matthew Lariosa speaking with our reporter Rick Glauert. Taipei and Washington have agreed on a support package for advanced missile defense systems in Taiwan. The $22 million deal includes maintenance for the US-made Patriot missile systems. These are designed to shoot down incoming ballistic missiles and enemy aircraft. Taiwan has reportedly deployed 9 of them around the main island, covering about 70% of its population. South Korea has slapped new sanctions on North Korea just days after the country test-fired a hypersonic missile. It comes amid increasing tensions on the Korean peninsula. Jaime Ocon has more.
In his first speech of 2024, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un outlines his country's ambitions. This time, the authoritarian leader is taking aim at neighboring South Korea, naming it the North's primary enemy and warning that Pyongyang does not intend to avoid war.
대한민국이라는 최대의 적국이 우리의 가장 가까운 이웃에 병전하고 있는 특수한 환경과 미국 놈들이 주도하에 군사적 긴장 격화로 지역 정세의 불안정성이 증대되고 있는 현실을 냉철하게 고찰해 보면 물리적 충돌에 의한 확전으로 전쟁이 발발할 위험은 현저히 높아졌고.
The Korean Peninsula was split between the North and South at the end of World War II. Despite signing a truce at the end of the Korean War, the two sides are technically still at war, and the goal of unification has continued to fade. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol quickly denounced Kim's accusations, saying that these claims ignore the peninsula's long and complex history.
북한 당국은 남북 관계를 동족 관계가 아닌 적대적 두 국가 관계로 규정했습니다. 이는 북한 정권 스스로가 반민족적이고 반역사적 집단이라는 사실을 자인한 것입니다.
In recent years, North Korea has stepped up its weapons program, firing more than 36 missiles in 2023. The most recent test, a new type of solid-fuel hypersonic missile, one that can travel more than 5 times the speed of sound. Analysts say that this weapon could help North Korea break through U.S. and South Korean missile defense systems.
북한의 목표는 러시아와 중국과 같은 수준의 그와 비견되는 수준의 어떤 극초음속 미사일을 개발을 하고 싶을 겁니다. 그래야지 미국과 한국의 미사일 방어 체계를 확실하게 돌파할 수 있는 그런 가능성이 더 높아지는 거니까요.
Eyeing increased threats from the north, allies like the U.S. and Japan have stepped up military cooperation with South Korea, with more joint exercises expected later this year. But the recent statements from leaders on both sides about a potential war are dimming hopes for a peaceful resolution. Analysts say this cycle of reactionary displays of force highlights South Korea's emphasis on deterrence to prevent a conflict on the peninsula.
South Korea, when they talk about unification, it isn't necessarily peaceful unification. It is unification by absorption. And, all of the moves that they've been making, especially in the past couple of years to increase and strengthen extended deterrence, is really against North Korea.
Analysts fear that a heavier South Korean and U.S. military presence could trigger North Korea to test a nuclear weapon, something it hasn't done since 2017. And with Kim Jong-un warning of preparations for war, there are concerns that any attempts to de-escalate the situation might come too late. Joseph Wu and Hamilton for TaiwanPlus.
China says its economy grew 5.2% last year. The growth rate met analysts' expectations and China's own annual target. It's higher than the previous year when China's economy grew just 3% due to COVID lockdowns and a real estate slump. But it's still one of China's lowest annual growth rates in 30 years. Taiwanese investment in China plummeted last year to a 21-year low. Taiwan's economy ministry says businesses invested around $3 billion in China in 2023, a nearly 40% drop from the year before. The number of Taiwanese investment projects in China also dropped by around 10%. It comes as Taipei seeks to diversify its trade and investment away from Beijing by developing economic relations with other countries. China has a record of using economic measures to put pressure on Taiwan. To learn more about what declining investment means for Taiwan and China, our reporter Jeremy Olivier spoke with the Economist Intelligence Unit's lead analyst for global trade, Nick Marrow.
So, Taiwanese investment has been on a general downward trend since it hit its peak around 2010 to 2011. But 40% is a pretty big decline. So why did we see such a big drop last year?
If you look into the data, we first started to see outward investment towards destinations that are not China really start to pick up around 2015, 2016, and really eclipse the investment that was destined towards China. And that coincides with a period of realization by foreign companies in general that, for example, manufacturing bases in Southeast Asia were just a lot more cost effective. But in the past couple of years, undoubtedly, it's tied to geopolitics and the risks tied to doing business in China, as well as the fact that the Chinese growth engine is somewhat sputtering at this moment. Foreign investors in general have become incredibly wary of the Chinese market because of the increasingly difficult operational considerations that are affecting their businesses, as well as the fact that policy clarity is just worsening.
So much of China's 21st century status as the factory of the world has been staked on the success of Taiwanese firms who are invested there. So what could this recent decline mean for the Chinese economy?
I think maybe there are two things that we can look at in terms of what this means for the Chinese economy. The first is the fact that as the economy becomes a lot more closed off, this has ramifications for trade ties, ramifications for diplomatic relations, cross-strait linkages specifically in general are very much bolstered by the fact that economic linkages between Taiwan and China are robust, and that has been a stabilizing force for both of those markets. China's industry is still relatively dependent on foreign inputs. Even its tech sector is still heavily reliant on Taiwanese chips and other intermediate components. And so if we start to see a fall off in economic ties, specifically trade, but also investment, then there are questions around where can the Chinese tech sector go from here? There is a strong push to replace Taiwanese products and Taiwanese businesses with, say, Chinese alternatives, but the verdict is still out in terms of how successful China will be able to actually achieve this goal.
What could the exodus of investment by Taiwanese businesses mean for those companies?
There's a really strong wave of interest right now among Taiwanese businesses in looking further afield. We're seeing a lot of interest right now in Southeast Asia, but also places like Mexico, given the proximity to the US market. I think a lot of Taiwanese investors are kind of waking up to this idea that as important as the Chinese market has been for their operations over the past couple of decades, it can no longer be the one-all, end-all.
That was the Economist Intelligence Unit's Nick Marrow speaking with Jeremy Olivier. Taiwan's facing a shortage of doctors who specialize in children and childbirth. John Van Trieste looks at how a problem driven by Taiwan's low birth rate and tough working conditions could force people to travel abroad for care.
Dr. Xie Zhangtang is back at his Taipei hospital for another day of caring for pregnant women and new mothers. He's been doing it for more than 40 years and has reached his 70s. But while other specialists his age might be eyeing retirement, Dr. Xie feels a duty to his patients to keep on. That's because there's a big problem in his field. Taiwan has one of the world's lowest birth rates, and that's made obstetrics and gynecology, covering women's reproductive health, as well as pediatrics, or the care of children, unattractive to new doctors. The conditions of these two fields don't help. Dr. Xie is on call 24 hours a day. Without younger replacements, the average age of specialists in these fields is now 57, making them the oldest doctors in Taiwan.
常常形容妇产科医师，尤其是产科医师，低附加价值、高风险、劳力密集、传统手工业。现在做这个事情，不完全是说为了要过生活，是会觉得自己还有这个能力。
But no one can hold on forever. Some doctors fear that in 5 to 10 years, Taiwan will have to hire obstetricians from abroad, and that children needing serious special attention may need to go overseas for treatment.
恶性循环，因为年轻人会觉得说，那我走这一科以后，我是不是一辈子都要这样？这个事情不会系之间的崩盘，10年的断层，那这些人离开，就算以后有新的医师上来，那他的经验的传承会有一些缺失。
The health ministry is rewarding a bonus of around $300 for doctors in tough fields after February's Lunar New Year, and pediatrics is on the list. But whatever encouragement that might be, the doctor shortage shows no signs of going away soon. Chris Ma and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Before we go, check out this international hot air balloon festival taking off in Chile. I'm Sally Jensen. Take care and see you next time.